talking about Mount Sinai and the holiday of Shavuot, the Chassidim, there are a couple of stories from the Chassidim that I wanted to share about Har Sinai. The first story, because the Gemara in Sota says specifically that the prophet Isaiah says, I will dwell with those who are downtrodden and of humble spirit. And the Gemara in Sota says, I dwell with the humble of heart. And as we see, the Hashem ignored all the hills and mountains and caused his presence to dwell on Mount Sinai, yet Sinai did not wax proud. Har Sinai was very humble. So this is one of the reasons also where I don't agree with the Christian scholars who argue that it was Jebel Makla or Jebel Laus, which are very tall mountains in the Midian area. And instead, I'm sympathetic to the rabbinic approach, which says that it was a humble mountain, and therefore it's most likely to be, in my opinion, Jebel Har, which is not the tallest mountain in the Midian area, but it does have a distinct shape, which is like a bell on top. So here's two Chassidic stories that I was reading about Har Sinai. And they're both powerful. So let me the first one is from Rav Avram, the son of the Maggid of Mezrich, and he was known as the Malach, the angel. So his grandson, Rav David Moshe of Chortkov, told that one time the Malach once visited his father-in-law, Rav Feivish in Kremenetz. And the whole town, led by their most honored scholars, turned out to gaze upon this man of Hashem, the Malach. But the Malach himself, he didn't face them. He just was looking through a window at a high mountain. Everybody there was waiting to hear some Torah, to hear his Torah from him, but instead he was just looking at that mountain. So amongst those people, there was a certain man who was very, very brilliant. He had a reputation for brilliance, but he was also a reputation for arrogance. So this young man assumed that the Malach, this holy Jew, that he didn't know anything, and that's why he was being quiet. And this man who was very arrogant, so he said, he brazenly challenged the Malach. We're getting to the punchline of the story. And he said, why are you gazing so hard at that mountain or that hill? It's only a pile of dust. Why are you staring at it? So he said, the Malach said, that's exactly why I was staring at it, because I was trying to think, and he said this back to the man, how a pile of dust can blow itself up to become a high mountain. You know, how much arrogance. And so this young man learned his lesson that we're dust. Basically, all of us are dust. And we sometimes blow ourselves up into mountains, but really we're all just dust. And that's why Sinai was specifically not given in the rabbinic tradition on the top of the mountain, on the tallest mountain. But there's another story which I found actually very, very, very moving. And this story was told about Rabbi Shimon Sofer. Rabbi Shimon Sofer was the rabbi of Krakow. And so he once asked the Tzanzer Rebbe to explain something in the way he was acting. Because when Rabbi Shimon's brother, Rav Avram Shmuel ben Yamin Wolf Sofer, the author of the Ksav Sofer, visited Tzanz, Reb Chaim had greeted him with just conventional respect. But when Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Vishnitz visited, Reb Chaim had gone out to welcome him and honored him in every way possible. So Reb Shimon Sofer asked Reb Chaim of Tzanz, how come you gave my brother cursory respect, but when the Vishnitzer Rebbe came, you gave him even more honor. You gave him the highest possible honor. What's the difference? And so he said as follows: why was the Beis HaMikdash built on Mount Moriah and not on Mount Sinai? Why was the Beis HaMikdash built on Mount Moriah and not on Mount Sinai? Mount Moriah is the Temple Mount. It's in Jerusalem. And Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. So why was the Beis HaMikdash built on Mount Moriah and not on Mount Sinai? Hold on one second. So what's the answer to this question? So the Tzanter explained, Moriah, what happened to Mount Moriah? That's where Avram bound Yitzchak up, and he was willing to sacrifice him to Hashem. That's basically a demonstration of the love of heaven. Whereas Har Sinai represents the Torah being given, the intellectual study of the Torah. And what the Chazal were teaching, says this answer, is that love of heaven is even more beloved than the knowledge of the Torah. So he said to him, your brother, the Ksav Sofer, he has tremendous knowledge of Torah, but the Vishnitzer is known for his love of heaven. And that's why I had to give him the most respect. So that's the answer. Mount Moriah represents love of heaven. Mount Sinai represents knowledge of the Torah. And the rabbinic tradition is that love is even greater. So that's that story.